Hello, Scrolls fans. My name is Smogan. I'd like to welcome you all to Heart of Scrolls. I'm joined today by a fantastic team, as always, of Scrollgers to discuss one of the major archetypes in trading card games, aggro decks. We're going to take some time to talk about what makes an aggro deck tick. Things like how do the goals of an aggro deck differ from goals of other decks, what should your resource curve look like to try to maximize your consistency, and what can you do overall to recover when things don't go well in those first few turns and you need to get back into the game. And as always, I'm lucky to have some very good players join me to share their insight on these questions and more. First up, we have Colorplant. Colorplant and I haven't been on a show together for Heart of Scrolls in quite a long time we were just chatting about, but we do love chatting together. And Colorplant is currently in the top 30 or 40 on the ladder and has played a major leadership role in the Badger Guild. So welcome back to the show, Colorplant.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
And he'll also share some secret tech on an aggro energy build later we're excited about.
Be excited.
We definitely, yeah.
Next up, we have Guido Fubini making his first appearance on Heart of Scrolls. Guido spent a fair amount of time as the #1 rated player in Scrolls. I can't remember what deck you were playing, so you'll have to remind me of what you were playing at the time. But recently, he's been doing really well with an aggro build. So welcome to the show, Guido.
Hello.
And what were you playing when you were #1?
I played. I actually stole a decay deck from some guy. I can't even remember. Oh,
Some guy is a really good player.
That's embarrassing. I think it was Tajik.
Tajik?
I don't know how.
Tajik.
Yeah, Tajik. Yeah, I think it was him who gave me like final input. I had a pretty similar build, and yeah,
Okay,
that
cool.
was what everybody played anyway.
And then last but not least, we are joined by Antirad. Antirad is currently #2 on the ladder, but of course he's #1 in our hearts. Antirad is also well known for being on the forefront of tempo order deck building. He was one of the ones to really popularize it even after Wings Captain got that nerf. So glad to have you on the show, Antirad.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
So thank you to all of my guests from the Badger Guild for joining us, and a big thanks to our entire audience for joining us live on Twitch or afterwards on YouTube and iTunes. After all, without our audience, we'd just be a bunch of guys talking to ourselves in an empty Twitch channel. That wouldn't be much fun, so we're very grateful that you guys tune in every week. If you have any questions for our panel or comments in general as we go, please feel free to leave them in the Twitch chat. We'll try to get to them as we can. And as always, to get us started, I'm going to have each guest talk briefly about an aggro deck that they've either been playing recently or that they've played in the past. And Antirad, I'm actually going to start with you. Will you talk about an aggressive deck that you've been playing recently?
Sure. Most people probably know that me from playing Tempo Order. I've been playing this for, well, pretty much since Rebellion came out, or shortly thereafter. This is my main ranked deck, and this is what I play most of the time. I did play some aggro lately, so I do have some experience with that too. Particularly with the enchantment type of aggro growth.
When you play your tempo order decks, I guess what draws you to play that deck? Because I feel like almost every game that I tune in and watch, that's what you're playing.
Yeah, I play that on my main account, so the other stuff that I play is on my alt. But I'm mainly an order player. I started out with playing order, and when Rebellion came out, there was a period of time when people, including myself, thought that we didn't have any way to play order. So I just tried a new approach and made a tempo deck, something that could hold up early game and just not lose tempo. And it kind of evolved into a very aggressive deck. So that's the origins of it from my side, but I also found it quite fun to play because it's probably one of the decks that produce very tense games, because sometimes, very often actually, you get games where you are not sure if you're going to win or if you're going to lose because
Gotta draw those decimates.
Yeah, exactly. You're often in a situation where those last couple of damage is going to be critical, so it's pretty exciting. I like
Something that really appeals to me about tempo order and all aggro decks is I feel like I'm playing a little bit of math. I feel like I have 10 rounds or 10 turns to deal X amount of damage, and I need to know how am I going to do that efficiently.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Antirad. I'm going to jump over to you, Guido. Guido, will you talk about an aggro deck that you've been playing recently?
I've just recently started playing again, like 3 weeks ago, and first thing I did was, of course, ask my fellow batchers for a good aggro list, and I actually got Anti-Rats list, which I played for quite a while. And then I switched to Growth lately, like maybe a week ago, and played Aggro Growth since then. So basically a very low curve list with a lot of enchantments, exploiting the Earthborn Mystic and different creatures with only one cooldown.
Yeah. I was surprised even after the Earthborn Mystic came out that enchantments were being so used in an aggressive deck. How many does your deck run? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't, but I can look it up. I got the deck list open. I think it's probably about 15 maybe.
15?
I guess.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot with that question.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's about 15. Yeah, actually, I guessed right. Yeah, it's 15. Yeah.
Yeah,
so quite a lot. I mean,
yeah, definitely a lot, but it seems to be working because a lot of people are playing it.
Yeah, I mean the deck runs pretty smooth. It's quite consistent in my opinion, especially with the Mulligan feature, which helps enormously, I think, because you can just ship the cards if you only have 4 or 5 drops. So that's quite good, working well at the moment.
And that's a good point about Mulligan really helping aggressive decks that are really dependent on those first few turns.
Yeah.
Color Plan, I'll shift over to you. Same question. Will you chat about an aggressive deck you've been playing recently?
Yeah, I haven't really been playing aggressive decks recently. I've been messing around with Tempo Order, but I'm really bad at Tempo Order, so I haven't really been playing that competitively at all. But I have been playing a lot of aggro, which is now the new term for aggro growth. It's aggro. There's no such thing as aggro growth. Yeah, aggro. It's much easier. I played that a lot when the Wild came out, when people thought, because a lot of Wild decks are slow, right? So I thought aggro growth would be the best counter. Yeah. But I didn't play the enchantment heavy version. I played the version that only had stag hearts, I think. I noticed like the version with 15 enchantments and the version with like champion rings and stag hearts. But I played only stag hearts and just lots of resilient creatures. Played like both Vaders and Kinfolk Rangers. Like, yeah, just trying to get a good hand with my creatures at all times and just spam my creatures. And it worked recently. Yeah, it worked good against wild decks most of the time. But the thing that kind of made me stop playing that deck was because the poison deck, the Decay Order thing, was really popular back then, which is not that long ago. And the deck does not deal well with poison at all. Yeah, so basically that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for sharing. In the spirit of this week's topic, I'm going to quit stalling and get right to the action. Aggro decks are a major player in the metagame of pretty much every trading card game in existence. We see it in MTG, we see it in Hearthstone, we see it in everything. And similar games, like real-time strategy games, also see sort of the same strategy where you just try to end the game as quickly as possible before your opponent can set up. See, for example, the infamous Circling Rush in StarCraft. In Scrolls, however, it's my perception that aggressive decks that rush the opponent were just really not present for much of the game's history. From the release of Beta until just a few months ago, there really was just mid-range and slightly later game mid-range. And only with the introduction of Wings Captain and her extremely powerful Honorable General ability did we start seeing aggressive decks truly be competitive and played in tournaments and things like that. And while Wings Captains herself has been nerfed, the core of the deck has of course remained and is now known as Tempo Order, and we're seeing more and more aggressive decks being built. But what is it that makes an aggro deck and not a mid-range deck, or not a tempo deck? We're going to take a minute to clarify this before we go any deeper into this conversation. So, Colorplane, I'm going to stay with you for a moment. Will you talk about what your goal is overall as an aggro deck and how it might differ from your goal when playing other deck types?
How a goal is as an aggro deck. First of all, you have to have a good start because you're aggro, so you want to be first with everything. You want to have the first creature, and you just want to keep your tempo up and never like stop. And like Fertile Soil is not being used in aggro because it stops tempo, right? So, well, you don't necessarily want to win as fast as possible, because if you go for idols with aggro, you won't win, right? Because you're going to be overwhelmed because you don't have the late game power as other decks do have. But you can deal with the other person's creatures and units before they can do anything about them or attack you back, and basically win before the other person gets to build up any sort of presence on the board or before they get to win. But you don't rush the win by not attacking the creatures and going for idols instead. Because if you spend resources to go for idols, you're probably gonna lose your tempo much faster than if you just keep going for creatures. Because normally you can, if you keep playing aggro in a game, you can normally just have one creature, trade with one creature, then send out another to attack an idol for you without losing tempo. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
No, that's a good
Yeah, I
point.
mean-
If you just go ahead.
Yeah. So, like, you spam enough creatures to have your creatures deal with his creatures, but still have creatures left over to attack idols, right?
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to
definitely. I
say.
mean, it's a lot about efficiency. I think. I mean, if the slow decks, they don't use their resources every turn. They're just building up, and of course they will try to use the resources optimally, but they will have late game drops, and they can't also have as many low cost creatures or spells, and so the aggro deck always tries to use every single resource every turn if possible to get more tempo, obviously.
And of course, sacrificing late game power for getting everything on the board early. But like Color Plant said, it's not always just pure idle damage, because then what's going to happen is you're going to take 2 idols down, and then they're going to wall up on 3, and you're done. Anti-Rad, will you talk a little bit about how to prevent that from happening, or how to put yourself in a position where they can't just wall you up and not let you get that 3rd idol?
Well, one thing you can do is probably just keep the board control as much as you can, because if you keep killing their units, then obviously they will not be able to block off everything, right? So you have to be very aggressive, but like others have said, you also need to kind of chip in or chip on the idols from time to time, so you get closer to the actual win condition. Normally, in the tempo order deck that I play, usually it's done through counter reduction. Those spells are very useful because you can keep the pressure on the opponent and just not let them build up a significant force until later on. And what I try to do is get the middle idol if I can, because that way when the opponent has been kind of hurt by my units, he goes to one side and tries to rebuild on that side, and then I can take the middle idol and go for the other side. So that's one way that oftentimes I get a win versus late game decks.
That's a great point, and I think that leads to my overall thought that an aggro deck, it's false to define it just as a deck that's trying to win by round X, round 5 or round 7 or round 10. It's more about putting things on the board early and taking board control, but taking it right from the beginning and then never letting up, never letting your opponent really establish a game plan.
Also, I want to mention something very quick. If you compare Scrolls to Magic the Gathering, where you have a very common way to do direct damage to the enemy's life points, here you can always try to push in a few damage just in the first few turns and finish the game later with direct damage, and that's hardly possible in Scrolls right now.
Right.
You have a few spells like Decimation, or a few even less used spells, but usually you really have to push the damage through with creatures, and there are very effective ways of walling of the idols that you have to protect. So it depends if you have a deck that actually has a few of those ways to sneak in the last few damage, idle damages, or if you really have a deck that like Aggro Growth that basically can do nothing against the Witch Doctor and Oblivion Seeker in front of it.
Just can't get through that
maybe,
wall.
Yeah, except maybe for Rumble, which I have seen in some Aggro deck lists. But
Yes.
other than that, I mean, growth is, I feel for me, it feels very different to Tempo Order, where you have all those flip and pother and decimation, whereas Growth just has Rumble, basically.
Yeah, I think Growth has a lot more raw power than.
Yeah, definitely.
Than,
also, yeah.
Yeah, than Order, and Order has to rely on more like surgical strikes and utility spells to get the damage in. That's the main difference between them.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my my next topic here. Before you can get to the point where you're making these powerful plays or these surgical strikes, you got to put the deck together. And there's no one way to build a good aggressive deck. Like Anti-Rad said, you can build it towards surgical strikes and hitting when it's most appropriate, or you can go with a more overall powerful early game deck. But in my opinion, overall, it's the low resource curve that is the most important thing in an aggressive deck. Because, of course, if you do not have a solid, consistent curve, you're not going to have a consistent early game. You're never going to establish that early board control, and you're never going to win. So will one of you step up and talk about how you go about building that early resource curve?
Well, I think, first of all, when I start building a deck, not even a deck that is going to be an aggro deck, so I usually start out with just adding creatures. I have an idea. In the case of an aggressive deck, I just want early creatures. So I try to look at each resource point to see what creatures are available and just pick the ones I like. I usually overpick at that stage so that I can trim them down later on. And the creatures are the most important thing in an aggressive deck, because they are the damage dealers. Even in a deck which focuses on enchantments also, you still need the creatures first on the board. So putting stuff on the field is your primary concern every time. So the curve, the resource curves has to be especially crafted towards these creatures. So it's optimal that you will have at least 3 1-drops, preferably more, and you get a good curve up to 4 or 5 resources.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, in Magic the Gathering, once again, you have this famous deck called Sly, where you have a lot of, like, a very specific number of 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops, but in Scrolls right now you just don't have that. We have a very limited amount of Scrolls like that we want to play in an aggressive deck. For example, you don't want to have, say, a useless contraption in an aggressive energy build. I don't know. So you choose the Scrolls you really want to use and build the deck around it, I think.
That brings up a good point about 1-drops. In other trading card games, I feel like I always want to have definitely a play on turn 1. In Scrolls, I'm not 100% convinced that turn 1 play is as important. Obviously, it is in aggressive decks, but I feel like it's the turn 2 and turn 3 plays that are more important. Do you guys agree with that or disagree with that?
I love.
Yeah,
sorry.
in general. In general, I think it's actually a good assessment, because the 1-drops usually are not that powerful, and with the counter mechanic, you can always do something about it. It's not like, for example, in Hearthstone, where you drop a creature and then if an opponent drops a creature, you can trade up straight up next turn. So you have some room for maneuvering. You can, if you're playing Decay, you can languid, you can do other stuff, and you can also position your units to not get hit by the other unit.
Color Plant, go ahead.
What?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to start.
Yeah, kind of. Like, I want to think about, because I want to kind of go back to the last question, but kind of stay on
Sure.
where we are. Because you need 1-drops in an aggro deck, right? You always want to start off with a 1-drop in an aggro deck, because you want to assert bird control as fast as possible. But still, you don't want 2 1-drops, because when you then go to, like, mid-game, right? And you start going into 4 resources and you only have 1, 2, 3 drops, then you're going to be card starved because you're going to play 2 scrolls each turn. That's not as powerful as playing 1 scroll that costs 4, for example. Like, it's much better to play a ducal skirmisher at turn 4 than like a wing soldier and 2 crossbowmen, right?
Right.
It may not sound as good, but like when it comes to playing 1 card or 1 scroll or 3 scrolls, that's a big difference. So you're basically like shrinking the normal deck that has like 1 1-drop, 2 2-drops, 3 3-drops down to being like 2 1-drops, 3 2-drops maybe. And yeah, most goes up to like having 2+ like different scrolls up to 4 cost, and then maybe having 1 at 5 cost, which is basically what both aggro and Tempo Order has. Tempo Order has a Vanguard. Most of the time, most decks have Vanguard, but only 1 Vanguard, and some have Cleaver in them. That's just like because Cleaver synergizes well with Tempo, because it gets buffed from Dominion, right? And Tempo Order gets Dominion fast, because that's what they're supposed to do. And aggro normally just has either Veteran or Great Wolf. Yeah. Some have both. And Rally, of course, because that just fits, because you want to attack fast. And yeah, I think it's just about shrinking the deck down, but keeping in mind that you have to be resource and scroll efficient each turn, and not being card starved too early.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you have 1-drops are very nice because you can always use the leftover resources. But a very funny thing that I just remembered was when I started playing scrolls in the first place, I don't know, a year ago maybe. I used to play Growth, and then one day I figured out it's not really a very good play to play Ragged Wolf the first turn. Right?
Even though it's a very aggressive play.
It is a 1-drop. You're an aggressive deck, but you don't want to play Ragged Wolf. And it went so far that I already knew, okay, I probably will win this game if my opponent opens with Ragged Wolf, because it's really not a good play. It's a terrible play, in fact. So I agree with what you said earlier, Smogan, that the first turn is probably like not the most important to get a creature on the board. On the other hand, Growth has a nice exception, which is the Vetter. If you get the Vetter out and it survives for 1 turn, especially if you start, that's actually very likely, you can have a huge tempo swing in the second turn when you already have 3 Growth. It's amazing. Like, yeah, you can do so many things.
Like a turn 2 Ragged against a turn 1 Vader is like the hugest back and tempo swing back at you.
Of course.
That sucks, man.
Yeah, it definitely does. But I mean, the risk is, I'm not sure. It really depends on how many Growth opponents you expect. But if you feel there's a good chance it survives, it can be a game winner in the first turn, like having Ragged with Champion Ring the second turn for no matter what he plays, or I don't know, even just the Earthborn Mystic turn 2 is amazing.
Yeah. Definitely.
Hard to disagree.
Yeah.
Color Plant mentioned going up to typically 1, maybe 2, 5 or more cost scrolls. Is that about what you guys tend to go for, almost like a bell curve centered around the 3-drop?
Yeah, I would say it's actually centered around 2 or 3 drops, because I actually run in both my aggro decks, both the Order 1 and the Growth 1, I run, I think, more 2 drops than I do 3 drops, I think. I'm trying to remember what the exact deck list is. But I mean, in the order deck, you obviously run orders too. So I guess they are not very aggressive creatures. They are there just for support. So I guess that's the reason why I have more 2 drops than 3 drops in that deck. Yeah, but I think it's both the 2 drops and the 3 drops that are very important.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a 2 drop with an aggro deck, then you are actually behind.
Especially if you go second and you're not making a play
Yeah.
until they're about to go on their 4th turn.
Yeah, definitely.
So to try to get those plays, this will be my last question about deck building. How many just total creatures do you use in your aggro decks? Guido, will you start on this?
That's a good question.
Here, I'll pull up your list. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I got my list pulled up already. So I think it's about maybe 25, 30, 2, 3, 6.
I think the standard is
10.
like
It's 30 in my deck
Between
list, but
30.
between 30 and 33.
30.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a very good number. You always want to have a creature. A hand with just enchantments is pretty bad.
Right.
That's pretty obvious.
Definitely want to play a creature every turn for the first few turns, and that's just going to take a lot of creatures to do that consistently.
Yeah. And I
Consistency's
just
the
looked
name
at
of the game.
yeah, definitely. I just looked at the deck list from Overlord, and also I think yours, Antirad, is pretty similar actually, and those also run a lot of creatures.
Yeah.
Probably also 30, 33.
Yeah.
I
I
think
said-
30 creatures has been like the norm anyway right now. Like the Mono
Yeah.
Decay deck runs about 30 creatures, I
Yeah.
think.
Yep.
Ranged energy goes up to like 27, sometimes 25, 27. I think. I haven't seen a late game growth deck in like 5 years, so I can't say anything about that.
I lost one today.
Oh, dude.
It's a rare animal anymore.
Yeah, I think 30 is like the norm in every kind of deck, really. And aggro decks tend to at least have that, maybe more.
I think if you present the aggro player with a good creature, he will always try to include it. Like, you never say, "Oh, I have too many creatures already."
Yeah.
If you have a really powerful creature, he will always say, "Oh, great!" Like a 2-drop, a 3-drop.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for chatting about your deck builds. I'm going to transition now into talking about how to actually play these silly decks, how to make them actually work. And in my opinion, it's playing aggressive, playing an aggro deck is almost as much about the mindset as it is about a deck list. You have to make decisions on when to go for the throat, when to go for more board control, when to start going into that late game desperation mode where if you're playing a decay deck where you're sacrificing everything to your watchers and trying to go for the kill, or when you're using decimations and doing all that math. Antirad, I'm going to ask you this question to start. When do you make that transition into just pure idle rush mode? When can you sort of tell that the game has gotten to the point where you just need to finish now?
Yeah, so there's no quick and easy answer for that because it does depend on what is happening on the board, and it does depend on the matchup. Like, for example, versus Structure Energy, I try to go for idols quicker because I realized that just hitting structures which have high HP will just not accomplish much because the opponent is probably gonna put them more than I can kill them in time. So I just try to concentrate on the idols very early on, unless I can kill like a Forge in just one turn, then I just don't bother. I just go for idols. But in other matchups, you do have to maintain board control. So usually you want to go first for that. And you want to go into the idle hunting mode when you feel like your opponent is getting out of control. So then there's a specific moment in time where you just have to kind of feel it. That's when it happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. In previous iterations of the tempo order list, I felt like there were more tricks to kind of snag that last idol people were playing. What's the card calls that switches your
Caller's
row?
Bane.
Caller's,
Oh, no, wait,
Caller's
row.
Bane, and then the one
Yeah,
that switches rows.
Oh yeah,
redeploy.
Redeploy.
Yeah.
Caller's Bane and
Yeah.
redeploy is like total idle snipes. But I've
Yeah,
noticed that
that
tempo
was
decks are
pretty
moving
cool.
away from that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, redeploy I think is actually pretty good still for an aggro deck if you want to go hunting for idols. The problem is that there's not really that much room you can fit into a deck. Only 50 cards, so you can when you put in all the creatures and you put in all the amazing counter reduction spells and the attack buffs, you are left with just a couple of spots. So it's really hard to fit in a scroll that is situational. So
Sometimes game winning, but often a dead card.
yeah, exactly. And you do have relentless damage in tempo order. You do have board manipulation with flips and podders. So there are other ways that you can do it. I think it's a valid way to do it with redeploy, but I think it might just not be the most optimal one.
Also, I just looked at your deck list, and you only play 2 flip, I think, right?
Actually,
Am I wrong there?
I think I run 3 at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just compared it with the Overlords, who is also playing Pother. But do you just prefer to, or do you just feel that you don't need the Pother?
Well, actually, when I started to play tempo order, I had both flip and both podder.
Okay.
So I ran 6 cards total, and gradually, when other stuff got introduced, like sword, I just felt out of the. I didn't want to cut any creatures, so I cut some counter manipulation, and I think 3 flips is usually okay.
Yeah.
Podder is actually, I think, better for things like when you just want to move a creature out of the way, because you usually can accomplish that without the loss to without losing a card, basically, because you draw another one. But but flip is more flexible and more precise. You don't have to rely on the RNG, so I like it more.
Another issue that aggressive decks run into is assuming they fail in their mission to gain board control. Their board has been wiped. They have an empty board, looking at an opponent with stuff, trying to figure out a way to come back and make it a game again. Guido, do you have any tips on how to recover from these board wipes?
Yeah, play another deck.
Play another deck. Okay.
Yeah, GG.
I mean, if you play an aggro deck, you like, you have to accept that there is a point in a game where you probably can't win anymore. I mean, there are ways. I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but generally you can say the later the game gets, or if you then still lose control over the game, you probably can't regain it very easily. And there are a lot of things that are created to stop aggro decks, and it's just very hard to get around. I mean, yeah, you just have to accept that and take the loss and play the next game, and don't think about it too much, because if you try to adjust your deck, if you try to adjust your play too much, then you might actually lose the focus and have a worse win rate after all. I mean, you can't have everything in a card game. You either go for the late game and might lose to a very good rush hand, or you go for the early game and might run out of steam late game. I mean, it's always a trade-off.
So one vote for nothing you can do. Any dissenting opinion?
Yeah. Please prove me wrong. Tell me what to do. I really would want to know, actually. I'm not...
Kind of have to agree with you, really. I mean, if you are either aggro aggro or tempo order, I think. If you lose your entire board, right, then you're
Yeah.
probably just fucked. Anyway, like no matter what turn it is, if your opponent has like 3 units on board and you have none, then you're probably gonna lose. But the thing with the aggro decks is that they can do a lot with just 1 unit, especially tempo order. Because like if you just have, let's say you've been almost wiped as tempo order and you have 1 skirmisher out, you have so many spells to make that skirmisher do so much attack damage and move like 2 tiles over and maybe snipe an idol. And I think it's easier to come back with tempo order if you haven't lost all your board, probably. But I also think it might be easier to lose board with tempo order than aggro, because I think aggro kind of takes the board more aggressively at the start and builds more like in HP and stuff. But I think tempo order might be a lot easier to get back with if you have few creatures left and like need to finish the game quickly before you have none left, then aggro can really. Yeah.
Well, it's that the countdown mechanic that makes it so difficult. If you do finally draw some good creatures off the top when you're top decking, drop 2 creatures on the board, they're still not going to attack for 2 rounds. So that gives your opponent plenty of time to find something to deal with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
maybe one way you can come back with, especially tempo order, is basically you need to think. Maybe you have done some damage to the idols. Maybe you brought down 2 idols, and then you need to just reach the 3rd one. So what you can do is just think what is the best play that you could possibly do in that situation. Maybe you can draw. Maybe you have a cleaver in your hand, and then you might just decide to top deck for 2 blessings of haste, right? So you can go for 8 resources and just play that from the hand. Just if you're behind, you're probably not gonna win, but it doesn't hurt to try and just think of the best play that you could possibly do.
That's a phenomenal point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
I call it
Yes.
playing to your outs. If you know your deck well, you know what are the plays I can make from this point that could lead to my win, and then you play assuming that will happen, so that if it does, you actually do win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have nothing to lose.
And one thing I just thought about was, which I find very hard, is if you have a war like on the middle lane on the field, and it's order versus order, then sometimes you fall behind, and you're tempted to try to somehow establish control over that single line. And I think sometimes it might be better to build a new row somewhere else and try to put pressure on another angle. But I wouldn't know. That's something I'm trying to learn, when to give up on a unit and build and try to gain an advantage somewhere else. And
Yeah, I do that a lot actually. If I see that, I don't know, I drop a crossbowman and someone drops a brave and I can't really do anything, then I just move the crossbowman down and try to build up
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah.
from to get a better position.
And I think that's where you can really gain an edge in and really improve your win rate. If you just try to look at every turn and look for those opportunities where you can maybe make a sacrifice, but not lose the game, instead of fighting a battle that's basically lost, because that crossbowman is probably not gonna attack anytime soon. So
that speaks to the point that just because you're playing an aggro deck doesn't mean you're playing a mindless deck that just plays stuff and lets it attack straight down the lane. There is a lot to maximizing the efficiency of your units so that you don't just lose horribly the first time they play a Night Scholar.
Yep. There's a difference, like in Hearthstone, if I may criticize that game at this point.
Please do. My favorite thing.
I stopped playing, but I looked into it, and it's obviously very attractive for a lot of people. But here you really have those aggro decks where you have a very like you can really make automated choices. Like in this situation, you just always attack his face, always attack his face. You never do anything else than attack his face. I mean, that's oversimplified, obviously, but in Scrolls you really have so many possibilities, and through the battlefield, I think that gives you an atmosphere like in chess, where you really have to move the pieces and have to think about every move you make.
And plan a few moves ahead if you can.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's always good to have the cards in mind that your opponent could play against you. Oh, yeah.
Well, sometimes when you're playing the aggro deck, you find yourself in a position where you are not the most aggressive deck in the game. For example, the mirror match. Let's say you're playing Tempo Order, and the other guy's playing Aggro, and all of a sudden he gets a great start. Now you have to start thinking, I am no longer the beatdown deck. I am now the control deck in this matchup. How do you make that transition?
Well, it's very hard, actually. The mirror matchups is probably the one that is the most random in terms of just draws, because if the first guy that gets to attack basically gets a huge advantage. Aggro decks are built to keep board control, and if you can just deny some board control from the opponent, then you gain a huge chance. So basically what you can do is try to build up enough force, and sometimes just hope for better draws.
Yeah, aggro mirror decks or aggro mirror games are normally really draw dependent in the first 3 rounds. Like the first person to get a brave, first person to get a creature even is normally best off. Or if you have like an even start, the first person to do a big play to kill all the other opponent's creatures normally gets the win. It's kind of hard to practice the mirror match when it comes to aggro decks, really.
Pretty darn swingy.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure if I agree completely. I mean, obviously the points are valid. I mean, also I don't have statistics to prove anything else, but I think while you have quite a lot of games that you can't really play good enough to win, even though you have the worst draw, I mean, those games definitely exist, and I think you cannot really do a lot about it. And I think also those games are there are more of those games in an aggro mirror than in a control mirror, obviously. But then you have a lot of games, I think, that are very much on the edge, because let's just say both players have an average draw. Then you have still quite a lot of room to gain an edge somehow and gain an advantage.
They're going to be little plays, but they're going to matter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are so many plays that I, for example, would have no idea about if I would play Antirad, for example, or also the Overlord. I mean, I played a bit of Tempo Order mirror match just because I quite like the matchup because it's over very soon normally. So if you lose, it's not a dragged out loss where you know you have lost for 10 rounds, but you still keep on playing. But yeah, you just lost. I mean, your board is cleared because he got Blessing of Haste and Focus on a skirmish. But yeah, I found there are also quite interesting games as well. Of course, also those swingy games, but yeah.
Yeah, like they can be really interesting in the first rounds, but like after one person has choke out the other person's creatures, it's normally over, right?
I remember games where I felt like this game is totally won. Like there's no way I will lose it. And then, especially against Tempo Order, you can't expect everything, and suddenly
Blessing of Haste, focus. There goes everything.
On a relentless creature, that's all you need really. So I don't know. I've seen both.
Yeah, how do your sacrificing decisions change when you think about what you're sacrificing for resources or scrolls in the first 3 turns? In the mirror match, I should say.
Well, I think you just see kind of what he plays and follow that. Like, a weird thing in the mirror match is, especially in the aggro mirror match, people normally go head on instead of just like normally you play a creature in the middle, right, and somebody plays in the up top left or bottom middle, right? Because you don't want to make it head on. But if you have a better creature, then you're normally going to play that against his not better creature or creature that's not gonna attack before. So a lot of mirror matches just goes on and just keeps. It's like a fight in the middle until one person's won, and then you have to move down if you are losing that fight. So it normally,
Crossbowman is killed by Brave, is killed by Aging Knight, is killed by.
yeah, exactly. A lot of aggro mirror matches comes down to that. So you really have to don't think about your curve a lot, but what you need right now. Even if you have just like 2 or 3 resources, because you have to think about that early battle, because that matters a lot in the aggro mirror. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on sacrifice decisions?
Yeah, in the mirror matchup specifically, or just in general?
Oh, I'll take either, but start with mirror maybe and then transition.
Yeah, well, if it comes to the mirror matchups, you basically want to make big plays. You don't really care. I agree with Marcus that you don't really care about your resource curve at that moment. You want to definitely get as much damage as you can, as fast as you can. So you can be top decking aggressively. You can, if you have a Blessing of Haste plus a focus, you can. You just play them, right? So it's going to be. It's going to be very aggressive in that respect. In general, I would say that putting units on the board versus slower decks is the way to go. So you want to have a good curve. So you want a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and then a 4-drop, for example. And in that case, you will likely sack some counter reduction spells, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, sacrificing is probably the most fun thing in Scrolls for me, because like the better you know the matchup, the better you know your own deck, the better you know the deck of the opponent, the better the choice that you can make for every sacrifice. And I think there's quite a lot of room for.
That's where the skill
improvement.
ceiling is those sacrifice decisions every turn.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts on how to make these decks work, how to make them tick, especially in the mirror match. We have about 10 minutes left, and what I'd like to do with the time we have left actually is talk about some of the different aggro decks that might be out there besides Aggrowth and Tempo Order lists.
Oh man.
Now, I didn't prep my guests on this, so we're all kind of going off the cuff here. But I do know that Colorplant has a list that he's been brewing, and he's willing to share with us. Will you talk about your list?
Yes, I will.
I'm so excited.
Right, so aggro, tempo, and growth, right? It's all news. It's all been done before. Aggro energy has been tried, right? But everyone's failed. And
Everybody's trying to cop on
Everyone's failed. It hasn't happened yet. And I've been working on it for a long time. But I think my mindset was wrong, because I was like, I can only go up to like 3 resources or 4 resources, right? But when I think about Tempo Order, a lot of them have Vanguards and stuff, so I went a little Gravelocky in the route, so I picked Outcast and Gravelock Elder, just to have a better curve, really. And yeah, the deck should be posted down in the Twitch chat right now for everyone to look at. It's not finished, right? It's at 53 scrolls at the moment, so it can be refined. Like the thing that really this deck needs to be good is 4-drops, right? A good 4-drop. Energy does not have a good 4-drop.
I was gonna say you're playing the wrong resource for 4-drops.
Yeah, like for Solemn Giant, that's not a 4-drop. That's like a 10-drop, right? So, and we have Echomaton, which is 1 attack, which doesn't fit in the aggro deck at all. And you
Hired
don't need
Marksman
resources.
never attacks.
Yeah, never. He sometimes attacks himself.
Yes.
Doesn't work. So, yeah, 2 Power Trip might seem weird. A little weird, but like, if you're just gonna go up to 5 and maybe not even 5, you're gonna need like some big plays. Because a lot of things, there's no like really cheap spells. They're Desperation and Arm Whip and Machinated, right? You're gonna want to play those with other stuff. And 2 Power Trips are in there for like big plays, like Bombard, Corrode, Machinated in 1 turn. if you want to go crazy about it. It's basically for when you can win the game, but you don't have enough resources. So I put 2 of them in. Ash Runner, I don't like him, but I need more early drops. And he's better than Smuggler, of course, because he has 1 less attack, but he is much better if you use him
Machinate
with
him.
Desperation, Machinated, whatever, Machinated. Like, do you say Machinated or Machinated?
I say machine, so I say machinated, but I don't know that I'm
Yeah.
right.
Well, I don't say McKean, so I should probably say Machinated as well.
Well, I'm gonna start saying McKean. But anyway, go ahead.
McKean.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so 2 drops, just Gun Automaton. I could go Smuggler, but just for Oculus Cannon, I don't feel like that's enough, even though card draw is nice. You know, actually, when I think about that, I might switch out Ash Runner for Oculus. Like I said, I haven't really, refined this at all, so it's
With
still in the
Ashrunner
work.
for Oculus? I thought you
No,
played both.
I have both, but replace Ash Runner for Smuggler to get more Oculus.
Oh,
Right. Yeah.
I would do
So
that.
this-
I think that's good.
Yeah, I think so. I have Furious in because counter reduction. I have Siege Cracker because it does a lot of idle damage. I'm actually not sure about him.
Could be
Yeah.
good.
I mean, he does a lot of idle damage, but he's not great. Even though,
Yeah.
and like you want to treat it like tempo order, like you want to achieve board control. He's not going to help you with board control.
Nope.
He's just going to help you with idle damage. So he might not be as great as I think he is.
But to be fair, there are not a lot of cards that give you board control. Or maybe there
Yeah.
are. Yeah, okay. There are Stormrunner and such, but
Yeah,
Oh.
Stormrunner doesn't do idle damage at all, but you do need board control, even though it is an aggro deck.
Yeah.
So I put him in as well. It's kind of hard to make an aggro energy deck because creatures don't have great stats for their cost normally.
Yeah.
Like Boomer is in there just because he's a 3/3 for 3. He's the only one that has the cost that's up to himself in cost or stats for his cost, right? Same for Gunaton. It's a 2/2/3 for 2. So that's
Yep.
the sole reason it's in there. Gravelock Outcast and Gravelock Elder basically because I need more creatures, and Outcast gets buffed by Elders. Elders are good in general. So yeah, I have not tested this deck at all yet. So it might.
But what are you
not
going to
be
do
the
after
best
the show,
thing
Cover
ever.
Plant?
Well, Smogan, thank you for asking. I'm actually going to be streaming after the stream over at my own Twitch channel, and I'll be testing this deck out, refining, and I will be working until I find the perfect aggro energy deck. Right?
But check
Bear
out
with
Color
me.
Plant's stream right after our show for
gonna
his own
happen.
personal private after show, Aggro Energy. I'm excited.
So
One more
am I.
deck I'd like to chat about a little bit. I'm going to have Anti-Rad talk about another deck that a lot of people have tried. I don't know that anyone's fully succeeded, but this is an aggressive order deck that splashes energy to try to pull off the machinated combos with the relentless creatures in order. Anti-Rad, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, many people have tried this, but and I can't myself say that it works as well as just tempo order. But it's something that I did try to play, and it worked out decently well. It's basically the tempo order deck list with some additional damage from Machinated, and also I have added Iron Whips. So this gives a total of 9 counter reduction scrolls, which is actually pretty big for a counter reduction for a tempo deck. And another thing is Copper Automaton, which is kind of like a transition into the energy resource, because I felt like I needed something that costed 1 energy.
And he fits.
Because and he fits because he has 1 countdown. You can haste him, and he has good damage. But the problem I've encountered most of the time is that it was actually very hard for me to sack for that energy resource, because when I was playing, I was always holding the hand. I got those energy cards, and still I saw that I could make better plays at that turn by just going for by just sacking for cards or just going for order resource to play more stuff from more creatures, basically. And sometimes it worked out when I just had the perfect play, like, I don't know, a Copper Automaton with haste, which killed a unit, which allowed another unit to attack something in the back. And sometimes I got stuck on the no energy resource path for the pretty much whole game. So it is a problem, but when it worked out pretty well. A Machinate on a Skirmisher makes it almost like a cleaver.
Or a harvester.
Or a harvester, yeah. It's actually pretty scary. And you can make some pretty big plays with that.
Can
Lots
I
of
give
fun,
a
definitely.
small shout out to Jan, who splashes Loyal Darklings in his Tempo Order deck?
Yeah.
Really?
Cursed me on stream
Really?
the other day.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Wow.
I don't like you,
Impressed.
dude. It was mean.
That's actually pretty cool.
I think I'll do that with my growth deck. I never know how to finish. You know? Also decimation.
He had Vigor Extraction, so he had natural ramp into the Darklings. But
Yeah, that's
still, that
actually-
is
Yeah.
pure evil. Yes.
That's pretty greedy.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our show there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. But before I go, I have quite a few things I want to plug and talk about that relate to our aggro decks here. Of course, first thing is Color Plant with a U. Color Plant, we go ahead and put that in the stream chat.
I will.
Link to your. Thank you. Color Plant with a U on Twitch will be following our show to play test his new aggro energy deck. We'll see how that goes. I'm rooting for him. If not optimistically, I'm still rooting for him.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Blinky has made a couple of beginner's guides to playing aggro that are budget aggro decks. A nice thing about aggro decks is they tend to be cheap gold-wise to build. You just need some really powerful commons and uncommons, really. The best creatures like Kinfolk Veteran or Kinfolk Ranger, you can just kind of throw in. They're relatively cheap. There are some exceptions, but not too many. So you can play a budget deck to the top 100 pretty well. And Blinky on his YouTube channel has both a budget growth and a budget order deck for you to peruse and try out when you are able to. There are also some cool decay aggro decks out there that Lahopa is insistent that I include, and I don't blame him because they're super cool. For example, he has an Undead Decay deck that is extremely fun to watch. So if you're feeling bold, you can try to build one of those and test it out. You also have the YOLO Decay that Blinky popularized, and I'm not sure if that's on his YouTube channel anywhere, but it probably is.
It is. I think
It is? Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So that is sacrifice everything you have for idle damage, and, well, you only live once, I suppose. Unless you're Decay where you keep coming back, but... And the last thing I'm going to say is check out Orangey has an awesome site, scrollger.com, where we will be linking all of the decks that we talked about on our show today. Look for the Heart of Scrolls tag on his deck list there. So we'll link to Anti-Rad's Tempo Order deck, Guido's Aggroth deck, Color Plant's Ridiculous Aggro Energy deck. Maybe we can get Lahopa to throw his Undead Aggro at us. We'll see. But you can find all those on scrollger.com. Go ahead.
I just want to say it's not really my growth deck. I can't. I stole it from SS Gladiator.
You are right. Thank you for your
Who
honesty.
got ranked 1 with it, and it's a pretty nice deck, I have to say.
Yeah. So thank you to SS Gladiator, another fellow Badger who we haven't managed to get on to Heart of Scrolls yet. But that's his deck, and it does pretty well.
Yep.
I'm probably forgetting something, but I'm going to go ahead and call it good there. Thank you to all of our listeners.
Yo,
for joining.
brag and brawl tomorrow?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Brag and Brawl is tomorrow. The
Yeah.
Badger Guild is facing off against, I don't know their name, but the French Guild.
French Spirit.
French Spirits, yes.
Yeah.
What time is that? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't.
Well, we'll find the time and we'll it'll be on the Reddit and it'll probably be on Scrolls Guide
Yeah.
as well.
And also, Atmos is hosting a tournament tomorrow.
Yes,
I think-
definitely. I
yes,
definitely
so
wanted to
check
talk
that
about
out.
that.
Go on Reddit and check that out. Double Deck Tournament, I think, is the name of it.
Nice.
That's going to be cool. I'm excited about that.
Mm.
So thank you to Atmas for hosting that tournament. And there is, I think, a pretty solid prize pool for that. Quite a few thousand gold to be won.
Yeah. It is.
All right. Well, those are the
Yeah.
things I forgot. So thank you for Color Plant for pitching in on that.
Always
that's all
here
I
for you.
have. Everybody go watch Color Plant play his aggro energy deck and go play some scrolls. Thank you all.
See y'all.
See ya.
Thanks.